Amanda,
Clay.
do you like scary movies?
Yeah, I think I do. Do you like scary movies?
I do, and I think a lot of other people do too, and we cover a lot on our show, but there are a lot that I think people are fans of that we don't cover, like, say, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, the Dream Master or whatever.
All of the Halloween franchise?
All of the Halloween, minus 2 of them, I guess. But we want to change that because Halloween is approaching. It's a very spooky time. We want to give you more horror movie content. So what we'd like to do is on Patreon, we would like to start covering these franchise movies one by one so we can really dig into, the worst that horror movies have to offer instead of the best. But in order to do that, we have to hit a certain level of fundraising on our Patreon, which you can help us do. So if you like what you hear on Rotten Horror Picture Show, you can head over to patreon.com/thepenskyfile and sign up. And if we reach our goal, then we'll be bringing you more horror movie coverage, and you'll also get access to all the other stuff we do at the Pensky File, which includes other sci-fi film reviews, Star Trek rewatches, content consumption discussions, and so many other things. I don't know how we have time to do any of this.
It's a lot. It's a lot of material.
It really is, and I don't have a job currently. Even more reason for you to sign up for the Patreon. So if you'd like to do that, Amanda and I would love to bring you some more horror movie content. So thank you guys, and happy early Halloween.
Spooky Halloween.
Hello, everyone. Welcome again to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast where we talk about films off of the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Best Horror Movies of All Time list. My name is Clay, and with me, as always, is Amanda. Amanda, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Clay?
I'm good. I'm very good. Today, we will be talking about number 185, which is Candyman, 1992's Candyman. Which is a movie that I've seen once, and I haven't, and I didn't love it when I saw it. I saw it maybe like 10, 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. And after this viewing, I still don't think that I love it. I think I appreciate it more, but
okay.
I find it a little bit I'm looking forward to getting into Candyman as a character because I find him a little bit unclear as to what we're supposed to think of him.
Yeah.
But I mean, it features Tony Todd as the main character, and I think Tony Todd, if not for the character of Candyman, his voice alone deserves to be on the totem pole of great movie monsters because it's a very imposing and instantly recognizable voice.
Yeah, let's just say that Tony Todd's charisma is doing a lot for this movie.
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Had you seen this one before?
No, I hadn't. This one was actually on my list for a really long time. Mm-hmm. Which is probably too bad, because upon watching it, I was very, very disappointed. Because I think I had built it up in my head like, ooh, this is going to be so interesting, and I'm so excited to see this. And then I watched it and was just like, well, fuck.
Yeah. I think, to sum it up before we get into it, I think that Candyman has a lot of great ideas and a lot of great images, but that's kind of, I feel like it's not really implemented and doesn't hang together as well as it could. And yeah. I am really looking forward to the remake that's coming out, I think later this year or possibly next year if everything's been shifted till next year.
I'm pretty sure it's still this year.
Oh, it is? Well, I'm very much looking forward to that as being written by Jordan Peele, because there is a lot of subtext in this movie that I think he probably has been salivating over digging into for a very long time.
Yeah. I have a lot to say about this kind of thing, so I'll hold it.
So we're going to play the trailer real quick, and then we will be right back to talk about Candyman.
Have you ever heard of Candyman? If you look in the mirror, you say his name 5 times.
In cities everywhere,
Candyman?
they whisper his name.
Right. Candyman.
It's just a story.
Candyman?
Candyman.
Just a ghost story.
Candyman.
An entire community starts attributing the daily horrors of their lives to a mythical figure.
The legend first appeared in 1890. He was attacked, mutilated, and burned to death. Poor Candyman.
Helen, a woman died in there. Leave it.
Everyone knows he isn't real.
That's modern oral folklore.
Everyone. Except Helen Lyle.
Bring it up. It ain't safe around here. I don't scare too easy. Wanna know about Ruthie Jean? They ain't never gonna catch him. Who? Candyman.
Who is that?
I came for you.
Do I know you?
Now she is about to discover
Helen? Get out! Get out!
what's behind the mystery.
I'm sick.
What's behind the legend.
Listen, he's under the bed!
And most terrifying of all,
Come with me.
what's behind the mirror.
He's here.
Candyman. You don't have to believe. Just beware.
All right, number 185 on this list is Candyman, with a 74% Rotten Tomato score, with a 78.643 adjusted. I think this is this the lowest movie we've done so far? Nope.
No.
American Psycho was 197 and is no longer on the list. So technically, this is the lowest.
But I feel like
lowest one we've done.
American Psycho's scores were better.
I think that they were. Yes, I think the percentage was higher on American Psycho. That was like 6 months ago by our time, so I don't even remember what it was.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Directed by Bernard Rose, written by Bernard Rose, based on the short story The Forbidden by Clive Barker, starring Virginia Madsen, Tony Todd, and Xander Berkeley in an extremely Xander Berkeley role. And if you know who Xander Berkeley is, he was like one of the top 5 premier shithead actors
Yep.
of the 90s.
Great category.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like he kind of took over for Miguel Ferrer, who is like top of the heap of shithead actors.
That's a really good call.
Miguel Ferrer is a lot more active of a shithead. Xander Berkeley is a lot more of like a skeevy shithead.
Yeah, he's also kind of like a mundane shithead. We've all known this
mundane
guy.
shithead is a really good way to put it. He's famously one of the foster parents who gets the knife through his face in Terminator 2. We just watched him as the turncoat secret agent. Secret Service member in Air Force One.
Yeah, who's not even given a good motivation for what he does.
Right. He just really likes Kazakhstan, I guess.
It's just a shithead.
And he was on 24. But we're just going to talk about Xander Berkeley.
Yeah.
It's
This is the
really
Xander
fitting.
Berkeley podcast.
It's really fitting that the episode about Candyman we spend talking entirely about an unimpressive white man.
An extremely mediocre white dude.
Yes. But anyway, Xander Berkeley, magnificent shithead actor. He's great and everything. Amanda, what happens in this movie?
Skeptical graduate student Helen Lyle befriends Anne-Marie McCoy while researching superstitions in a housing project on Chicago's near North Side. From Anne-Marie, Helen learns about the Candyman, a knife-wielding figure of urban legend that some of her neighbors believe to be responsible for a recent murder. After a mysterious man matching the Candyman's description begins stalking her, Helen comes to fear that the legend may be all too real.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so some things you will find in this movie include expository Ben Franklin.
Gotta have them.
Toilet bees.
Worst kind.
Absolutely. Sexy bad boy Ted Raimi.
I don't know if I can handle that one. We might have to expand on that a little bit.
We'll come back to it. Softcore Dana Scully.
Mm-hmm.
And questionable parenting?
Yeah. I mean, given what happens with Trevor and his skeevy relationship with his student, I don't know if Stacy, the student, really had a lot of positive male role models in her life, which drove her into the arms of a much older man who is clearly cheating on his wife. So I'm just drawing conclusions that they are putting in front of us. This is a movie about subtext, and I am reading all of it.
So clearly the questionable parenting bingo square this week was brought to you by Clay.
I'm just trying to make sure all of the spines on the bookshelf match, you know? Because you don't want to have that one that's just a different color and throws the entire thing off.
All right.
So, did you ever do Bloody Mary or anything like that when you were younger?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I don't think I ever had the balls to do it, frankly.
Really?
Yeah, it was. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to open that door just in case. I think.
Just in case. I mean, I was the sort of 13-year-old girl who wore an upside-down cross made out of nails on a chain, so...
Oh, shit, that's awesome. Well, you know, I had older cousins who would babysit me. I'm the second youngest on my mom's side, so a lot of her sister's kids would babysit us. And I very clearly remember one of my older cousins, while babysitting me, telling me about a party she was at where they did a Ouija board thing, and then she thought that she saw a demon afterwards. Or so I forget exactly what the specifics of it were, but it was enough where I was like, I'm interested to know more about this, but I also would like to do so from afar, so I probably won't engage this myself.
I'm just imagining like 6 or 7-year-old Clay pulling out a notebook and being like, this is as close as I'm going to get. Tell me everything.
Yeah. Well, I may have told this on this show before, I can't remember, but when I was in the 5th grade, at a parent-teacher conference, my teacher at the time asked my mother in his very thick accent, what is his fascination with the supernatural? And I wish I had been there to hear it, because that's some Abraham Van Helsing shit right there.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So we've got Candyman, who is a he's sort of like he's kind of similar to Freddy Krueger in a sense, as far as the role that he plays in the community. Not specifically, but he's kind of this boogeyman, and he is very much like in the tradition of Bloody Mary, you have to say his name 5 times into is it specifically a mirror, I guess? Yeah, it is, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. That's all cool.
5 times is a little much, though.
It's a lot. I was wondering, who determines the hierarchy of that? Like, is it like you have to have tenure in order to get down to 3? Like, do the new guys...
Trevor / Xander Berkeley would relate to that statement.
Yes. Like, do you have to... do the new boogeymen ghosts, do they have to... Is it like 6 to 10, depending on where you stand in the pecking order?
Right. And when you're really badass and you're a really scary revenge demon, do you get down to just like 2? Or does if somebody says your name once, do you appear?
Or, on the other side... And this speaks to me not exactly knowing what to think of his character. He could just be being extra considerate, where he's like, listen, if you're going to do this, you really got to commit to it. You got to go 5. I'm not just waiting to jump you like, drunk ass Beetlejuice over here doing 3. I need to know that you really want me to come and kill you.
Well, you know, I'm not going to disagree with that, because there is this weird, amongst all the other weird things in this movie, there's this sort of weird feeling about the Candyman where he's not, like, he's not just all about the, like, wanton murder spree.
Right.
Like, he seems very, kind of put out and a little annoyed that Helen fucks up his situation. Because he says, you came here, you... pretty much she damaged the community's belief in him.
Right.
And because she did that damage and discouraged them from believing in him, he has to shed innocent blood. That's his whole thing.
Right. That's where I was thinking he's kind of Freddy Krueger-esque in that he kind of thrives on the fear that his name represents, and if people aren't afraid of him, then he doesn't have power or something like that.
Yeah, there's that, and definitely the relationship between him and Helen is kind of similar to the Freddy Krueger Nancy dynamic.
Yeah, I think that's where it gets a little bit dicey for me as far as the character, because I'm totally on board with the first half of that. It's the relationship with Helen, which goes into this sort of Dracula thing where she's the reincarnation of his dead love from 200 years ago or 100 years ago or whatever, that he's trying to win over to his side by gaslighting her and framing her for a bunch of murders. I that stuff is a little bit harder for me to track. And I maybe we should just get into it. I wasn't sure what to think of him, and you kind of said this. You said the same when we were talking earlier, and I found a quote. This is from IMDb, from the director, where he says, quote says, many think of Candyman as one of horror genre's most terrifying villains, but Rose said that, quote, the idea always was that he was a kind of romantic figure, and again, romantic in sort of the Edgar Allan Poe sense. It's the romance of death. He's a ghost, and he's also the resurrection of something that is kind of unspoken or unspeakable in American history, which is slavery as well. So he's kind of come back, and he's haunting what is the new version of racial segregation in Chicago. And I think there's also something very seductive and very sweet and very romantic about him, and that's what makes him interesting in the same way there is about Dracula. In the end, the boogeyman is someone you want to surrender to. You're not just afraid of. There's a certain kind of joy in his seduction, and Tony was always so romantic. Tony ties him in so elegantly, and is such a gentleman. He was wonderful. I agree with that last part. He seems to be a really nice guy. My friend Pat met him once in the airport, and if you ever run into Pat, ask him to regale you with that story, and he will gladly do it.
Yeah, I have a lot of conflicting feelings.
I agree. Yes.
About that statement, about this movie, about the character. Like, I will preface this all by saying,
if you can't tell, listeners, we're kind of having a hard time figuring out how to drop into this one.
Yeah, if you can't tell, listeners, we're obviously two white people.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like when you watch this movie, it's very clear that this was written and created by a lot of white people in the early 90s. Where
is Bernard Rose white?
Yes.
Oh, Bernard Rose is white. Yes.
Yes.
I just assumed he was not white, but apparently he is.
No, I actually took a little time this evening to look up Bernard Rose and the producers of this film and the cinematographer, and I think the editor as well, and they are all white.
That's really fascinating.
And Clive Barker, who wrote the short story this is based on, also a white man.
Well, I was going to mention, I was going to ask you this, in the movie they talk about Candyman being this sort of romantic figure. And the original version of Candyman in the story is apparently he's described as an imposingly possible white man. He is described as having a rather unnatural shade of yellow that, of course, adds to his candy theme, with an unruly red beard, which sounds right up your alley. So I don't know if that would be more attractive to you if it was that. But
Clay is making fun of me because I am married to a ginger.
no, that's not why. I was just. But seriously, yeah, it's an interesting choice. It's an interesting change that makes. Honestly, I don't know what to think of that now, because there's so much subtext going on in the story, and it's really interesting subtext, and the subtext is so much more interesting than the actual movie.
Yeah,
because this backstory of Candyman as this, I believe he was the son of a freed slave, so he's not himself a slave, who became a painter. And who then was painting a white woman's portrait. And I can't remember the exact specifics of what the breakdown is, but essentially, I believe the father of the woman sends a group of hooligans to... maybe he was having an affair with her. I think it was something...
Yeah, I think they fall in love.
Yes. And ultimately, he's killed in this really ghastly manner where they cut his hand off and they cover him with honey, and he's stung to death by bees. And I think then they burn him, I think, after that.
Yeah, I think that's supposedly part of the legend.
Yeah. And this idea that this spirit of vengeance and death comes from that background is very novel in horror movies. As far as I can remember, Tony Todd, the Candyman, is probably the first high-profile black monster outside of Blackula, and Blackula is or Blackenstein. I think there was a Blackenstein as well, but those are both interpretations of pre-existing things. Obviously,
right.
Candyman is more or less a wholly original character. So it's a big deal, and giving him that background is very specific and very interesting. But then when they get into the story of this movie, it's like Helen is so uninteresting, and she's just like this white lady who's trying to get some stuff for the dissertation she's writing out of the worst neighborhoods of Chicago, and she just like backs her way into this.
It's
spirit of born from prejudice and hate, and it's just really weird.
Well, it's weird on so many levels, the way that this is executed, because I agree with what you're saying, where this movie takes what could be a really compelling and horrifying and sympathetic origin story for this, like, quote unquote monster like Candyman. Mm-hmm. Because essentially his story, with some modification, some significant modification actually, but his basic story is like Emmett Till.
Yes.
Yeah, who was the young man, I think he was, like practically a child. He was like 14 or 15.
Right.
Who was beaten horribly and lynched and murdered by a bunch of white men for, like, I think he whistled at a white lady. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't even think he didn't even actively flirt with her. He didn't do anything.
Right.
And his backstory was that he was from Chicago.
Oh, so, I didn't know that. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely like this historical basis in this real horrible story, and there are so many examples of these kind of horrible stories that happened to people of color and are still happening to people of color. But it takes that story and then it doesn't do a whole hell of a lot with it in once it moves to the modern day of the film.
Yeah, it kind of, I mean, maybe I'm reading into this too much, but I feel like it invites it. It's like, it takes this character whose backstory is he was horribly murdered for loving a white woman, and turns him into a monster who is essentially doing the things he was accused of.
Yeah,
Where
it's so
he's, you know, it's kind of weird.
That was my next thing I was gonna bring up, is that I find it so strange that, all right, we've explained the backstory of the Candyman. He comes back as this vengeful spirit who then starts murdering other black people.
Right. Yeah.
Which is like, but why? Why?
Right.
Why isn't he like, I feel like this movie would be much more interesting if it were happening in Helen's building. Which she even goes into all the background about how that building was originally built to be part of the projects before the architects realized, oh wait, it has this great view, we can sell it for condos for so much more money.
Yeah, I was having a little trouble tracking that backstory as they were telling it. And so I actually thought that her building used to be the projects that was then gentrified. So I thought this stuff was going to be happening in her building in sort of this like I don't mean this euphemistically the way people use it, but like an urban version of Poltergeist, where it's like, you know what I mean? Where it's like they took this building which has all of this violent history and racism attached to it, and just gentrified it into a bunch of expensive condos, and you still have then you have this evil spirit inside it that is it's expressing all of this deep-seated stuff out onto the white people who couldn't care less because it's a nice view. They don't do that. They have him specifically be rooted into the projects in a way that, I'm not like, I don't think that he has to be inherently like a spirit of vengeance. I don't have a problem with him just being like an evil boogeyman. I think the movie doesn't really take a stand on any of that. You know, because he is a spirit of vengeance in some sense, but he's also just killing whoever says his name 5 times in a mirror, there's regardless of race or background. But then he's also this like romantic, come be one of me kind of. I just don't know what to make of him.
Yeah, it's like they tried to make him fit into so many sort of like classic like tropes and stances that you could have a horror movie villain take. And because they tried to work in so many of them, like, oh, he's out to get revenge for his horrible murder and his sad backstory, or no, he's just this creepy Bloody Mary style monster who's going to kill anybody who calls on him. No, also he's this compelling Dracula, sort of seductive gentleman death figure. Like, it's too many different things. Like, it's too many different buckets to try and put one character in like an hour and 40-minute movie into. Right. I kind of almost wish he was some sort of like monkey's paw wish fulfillment kind of character, where the urban legend is you say Candyman 5 times and then he shows up and you can sick him after someone who's wronged you or something like that. I don't know, like, because the other interesting bit of subtext that they do that seems like a cheap way to end the movie until you kind of put it in the context of who Candyman is and where he comes from is the thing at the end where Helen ultimately also becomes a candy person, I guess. She herself becomes this vengeful spirit, and she is ultimately born of the same kind of, not as intense, but she is ultimately the boogeyman of Trevor, who is representative of essentially the suppression of female empowerment, because Trevor is cheating on her. Do you know what I mean, though? Trevor's cheating on her. With a much younger,
yes.
I hesitate to even call her a woman. She looked like she was maybe 17.
Mm-hmm. And you've got creepy Ben Franklin, his buddy there, and they're both really dismissive of the work that Helen's doing on urban legends and stuff like that.
He's so dismissive of the work she's doing that in the very first scene we meet him, she comes at the end of he gives a lecture and he says all this stuff, and she comes down to say something to him at the end of the lecture, and she says, pretty much she's been reaching out to freshmen for her thesis to gather urban legends and like oral folktale style stories. And he gives this whole presentation on them in his class. And she goes and says to him, why would you do that? You knew we were talking to them about the stories that they knew, and now you've given this whole lecture on all these other things, and it essentially has like destroyed her subject pool.
Right.
And he does it knowingly. And he's very dismissive of her concerns. Like, he clearly has, like, from the very beginning, very, very little respect for her and her work.
And then the scene with the Ben Franklin guy, he basically says to her, why are you even doing that? Didn't you read the paper I wrote?
Oh,
like,
yeah. But, you know, the paper
whatever.
I wrote 10 years ago or something.
Yeah, 10 years ago. Yeah.
As though academic work should never be updated.
Yeah. And then her story, Candyman aside, through the rest of the movie is essentially be one of being locked up and thrown away because people think that she's insane. And then Trevor very, very quickly dumps her and gets rid of her in favor of this younger student that he's with. So there's a real sort of like, and then her ultimately turning into this boogeyman is a very specific kind of boogeyman for that sort of, for the Trevor sort of character. And so it's really interesting subtext, but I don't know if the way that almost feels like a different movie.
I mean, it's Jane Eyre.
Yeah. Sure.
She's the first Mrs. Rochester. She's the mad woman in the attic.
I'm going to pretend that I know what that means, but I did not read that. I'll take your word for it, though.
Don't worry about it. Probably anybody who listens to this is just like, okay, yeah, all right. But that there's a whole...
Now who's dismissing
myself?
No, I don't. I'm sure our audience is very well read.
That's true. But you're right. It's literally. I think in the novel Jane Eyre there is a very prominent plot line that kind of mirrors this. But it's also a trope that appears again and again in like movies and film of like kind of the insane woman. I don't know if you've ever read The Yellow Wallpaper or something like that.
Great. Yeah, that's a good one. I love that one.
So there's a lot of layers of that. So it's trying to say sort of something about this movie just seems like it's trying to address oppression. And being a woman and you are sort of discounted and subjugated in a certain way, and being a person of color and there's violence enacted on you and you're subjugated in a different way. But it's like it's trying to say so many different things all at once that it doesn't really say any of them well. Sure.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know. It's very scattered. Like even as we were watching it last night and we were chatting with a couple of our friends, and like there were definitely a couple times where one of us would say, like, wait, I don't understand. Why is he so obsessed with Helen? What's happening? Oh, okay, right. She's supposed to be the reincarnation of the woman he was in love with. Or what's happening? Why does she keep getting, like, weird visions of the baby? Why doesn't she just tell them where the baby is?
Yeah,
like,
she's been arrested for viciously murdering this woman's dog and then stealing her baby. And once she finds out where the baby is, which is like next door in the Candyman house, she at no point is like, I think I know where the baby is.
Right. That baby sits around for 2 months with nobody taking care of it.
And see, that's an instance where I feel like, last time we talked about this narrative cone of vision idea, which I'm sure someone has thought of a name for this idea long before I thought that I was brilliant in coming up with it. But
I like your phrasing for it because I just imagine you in one of the cones you put a dog in when they've had surgery.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very similar to that. But like this is an instance where I feel like cops don't help the story, because it would be a lot more interesting if they focused in more on her and Trevor without bringing in this idea that she is actively being like arrested for murder. Because then it brings up all these questions where it's like, well, she seems to know now that Candyman is stashing the baby next door. Why doesn't she go tell them that? Or, it's, and I get that the idea is that she's supposed to be crazy and, it's et cetera, et cetera. But it's, I feel like the focus of what this story is about is not quite there.
I think it, like I said, I think it's trying to do a lot.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's trying to do too much for what it is. Like something I couldn't help but keep thinking. And I feel bad. I feel like I kind of do this all the time when we talk about these movies, where there's always like a secondary character or even a tertiary character that I am way more interested in, or somebody I think would be just fit the narrative better. Like this whole movie, all I could think of was, why isn't her friend / colleague Bernadette the main character?
Sure, yeah.
Like, that would be a much more interesting movie, and it would say something like, if you swapped the two things, where if the action was taking place in Helen's apartment building, but Bernadette was the main character, you're going to get a lot more out of that in terms of like subtext and commentary on like how people of color are treated and how women of color are treated. Like, like, I don't know. It just, it feels a lot more substantive to me and a lot more clear, like, than what is the movie trying to say, without kind of like, I don't know, there's just this weirdness having Helen be the main character, where it's like, you have no connection to this community. You're not a very interesting character on your own.
Right. Yeah. And
I don't know.
And if you had Bernadette as the main character, even if you didn't change anything else, and it still was taking place in the projects in this violent area of Chicago, you then have this woman of color who is forced to confront this spirit of prejudice and segregation that is living inside the modern embodiment of prejudice and segregation.
Yeah.
And how she, as a woman of color in the present day, is dealing with that, instead of just having Helen basically sightseeing for a paper.
Yeah, that's a really, the sightseeing especially is a really good way to put it, where it's just like, when they first show up, the first time they go to Cabrini Green, and there's a couple young men like at the entrance, and they're sort of giving them a hard time. They sort of are treating them like the cops. They're like, they kind of don't want them there. And it's like, of course they don't, because like, why are they going to talk to this random white lady?
Yeah.
Like,
also, there's no like, I understand the quest, the fact that Helen is presented as a character who's like not afraid to jump into the deep end of the pool and is open for experience and adventure. But there is something kind of weird about this white lady breaking into this apartment and then busting open the thing in the bathroom so she can climb into the next door place, which is a place where someone was brutally murdered. And she's just like, no, it's fine. I'm just going to take some pictures. Don't worry about it. I'm sure this place is a dump anyway. No one's going to care. It's really weird.
Yeah, because
and I was just saying, I don't know how much I feel like that should come across no matter when this movie came out, but I wonder if some of that is a more distanced view of it, given the way this stuff is presented and thought about now versus 1992, which is fucking 30 years ago, which is blowing my mind.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that in 1992, if you took a character like Helen out of this movie and put her in a slightly different, like, horror movie or thriller, I actually think she'd be kind of a great sort of feminist main character.
Sure, yeah.
Because she has weaknesses, she has strengths, she screws up sometimes, but she keeps trying to push through. Like, she's a fairly well-rounded character. I think she's got lots of, like, good qualities in addition to her flaws. But when you put that character in the context of this movie, there's just something uncomfortable about it. Like, just this white savior complex kind of thing. Like, even at the very end, when she crawls out of the pyre with the baby, and she hands the baby back up to the mother, and she sacrifices herself, and then all the community from Cabrini Green comes to her funeral and, like, honors her. That was a bit much. Yeah, it's very, like, you also, like, invaded these people's lives and homes and treated them a little bit like they were animals in a zoo.
Yeah, like the fact that she saved that baby is completely inconsequential. It's not
it's like she saved the baby to save herself.
Right. Yes. Yeah, and it's not like her initial interest in Candyman or anything that was going on at Cabrini Green was noble in any way.
Yeah, she wasn't doing this paper to try and draw attention to the plight of these people who were forced to live in these horrible projects. She's doing it so she can get her thesis done and get her dissertation published and get her PhD and get tenure somewhere.
Right, exactly. And yeah, and I agree with you. I think if you take that element out of it and just focus on her as a character in regards to, like, the Trevor stuff, and even... Let's say you take the racial subtext out of it and you keep the rest. So you've got Candyman who's gaslighting her into thinking she's killing these people while she's also doing all the stuff is happening with her husband. I think she is a really interesting, like, really good character. Like you said, she's really strong. I really liked the scene where she made him dinner for some reason. And I know that sounds really misogynist to say, but you know what I mean? Like, there's something about that relationship where it's like she is going through a lot of stuff. She's actively trying to put some effort into this relationship, and he clearly has just come home from banging his girlfriend somewhere, and you know, it really made me feel bad for her in a scene that is fairly unremarkable as far as what's actually going on. Like, it's not flashy, but it's a little domestic scene that I thought was really nice.
Yeah, and I actually really like the way it was used later on to juxtapose, like you get it from Trevor's point of view when he starts to regret what happened, and at the very end, and it's sort of flashing between when the house used to look the way it used to look, and Helen's going through, like, kind of bustling around the kitchen and cooking all these things and trying to do all these things at once, but she comes out and she, like, runs over to him and gives him a kiss, and then it's flashing back and forth a little bit between that and the scene of 17-year-old Stacy with her dull chef's knife that she can just slap into the palm of her hand, blade down, like just goddamn butchering a root vegetable or something.
I legit thought that she was cutting up pieces of raw meat and just throwing them into a salad. And that juxtaposed with Xander Berkeley in the bathroom going, "Oh, I've made a terrible mistake." Like,
Helen. But yeah, I liked the way that was used, because I didn't when that scene happened earlier on, I thought it was just being used to show what a shithead Xander Berkeley is, and then to have it kind of come back and hit him. And get to see it come back and hit him of how badly he fucked up. It was kind of great. Like, I kind of loved that mirroring. But yeah, it's so weird in this movie that this movie tries so hard to keep all of this stuff in and say all of it that it does justice to very little of it.
Yeah. And I understand that our reading of this is probably colored a bit by the fact that we have the privilege to be able to nitpick a movie like this, where I know a lot of people of color love this because Tony Todd is such a fucking awesome character. Like he's a black supervillain essentially that didn't exist.
Yeah.
So I don't want to belittle the movie in that sense, but it does. I mean, it does feel like it's a little bit exploitative, and not in like a 70s kind of way. In just a sort of like, the movie itself feels kind of like it's doing what Helen is doing, where it's sort of sightseeing horrible racial history in order to write a paper.
Yeah, and I think that is like, I think that's so true, and I think that's kind of the root of the problem, and part of the reason I brought up at the beginning that everybody who had a hand in shaping this movie was white. And I think this is the kind of thing where, like, when people talk about like diversity in Hollywood and movies and all of that, like this is a good example of why that's important, because maybe having one or two people of color involved in the process, maybe they would have been able to sort of smooth some of this out, or like figure out a way to approach it that felt less like uncomfortable and just incongruous with what I think the movie is trying to do. Because I think the movie is actually trying to make a really pointed commentary about how like people of color are treated in America, about the common fear that like, a white woman is afraid of black men, and like, why is that? Why are we taught to be that way? And I think this movie is doing a lot, and I think it just would have benefited from somebody who could have given some editorial points from inside that experience rather than from people who are so outside of it.
Yeah, because like I said, it's just weird to me where it's like, Candyman, oh, what's his deal? Well, he comes from a time when white women were afraid of black men for no reason, but they thought that they were monsters. And okay, so what does he do now? He chases white ladies and is an actual monster. And it's like, I think you're not really passing the test here.
yeah, it's just like again, I think we're coming down really hard on this movie.
I know.
Because I think there are so many things we both actually see like potential in.
Yes.
And it's frustrating when it doesn't.
That aside,
yeah.
If we want to take out all of that stuff and just look at the movie itself,
yes.
I still think it kind of dips into this territory where I feel like a lot of horror movie sequels end up going, which is like, I call it the Hellraiser sequel effect, because like by the time they got to the third or fourth Hellraiser movie, they were essentially all just, let's do a weird thing where it seems like someone's going crazy, and then we'll throw Pinhead in there for 5 minutes. And that's kind of the vibe I get from this movie, where it's like they don't have enough story to really do anything interesting or pointed. So it just becomes, what if it looks like she's going crazy because Candyman's killing these people?
So should we just call this her? Should we just call this the Clive Barker effect in that case?
Kind of, because there's a couple other things in this movie that are very much Clive Barker things where I'm like, ugh, these are my least favorite things that he does. He does them in Hellraiser too, and I don't like them.
I mean, he's very preoccupied with that sort of like psychosexual attraction to evil.
Which is fine. I have no problem with that.
That can be very interesting, but it's like he has a very specific style.
Yeah. And also, I find this movie, I think a lot of the imagery is great. I think Candyman, fantastic visual. That giant coat with the fur on it, that awesome gross hook.
Oh, yeah.
Bees. We didn't even talk about the bees. The bees are cool. He opens the jacket and his like chest is the bones are all exposed and stuff. That was cool.
That is so awesome.
But as sort of like a microcosm of my overall problem with this movie, the first time he shows up fully, he's standing at he just shows up at the far end of a parking garage, full frame, just like hanging out. And it's like, there's nothing visually interesting about that. And a lot of this movie takes place during the day and is not shot in any sort of particularly scary presentation. I don't know. Like, you've got all this great stuff in the Cabrini Green building with like the giant mural and the face hole is awesome. But it's not implemented in a really interesting way. I think the stuff toward the end is nice when they start getting into the stuff with the bees and the bonfire. That stuff is pretty cool.
Yeah, when it starts to get a little more like almost like dreamlike or nightmarish, however you want to frame it, where it sort of takes on that sheen of unreality. Because I think that scene between the two of them, between the Candyman and Helen, where it's sort of like their final scene together before the pyre. Mm-hmm. And they're in the kind of abandoned area of Cabrini Green, and she's sort of looking at him, and even for a second, they shoot her like she's in an old Hollywood film.
Sure.
Where it's this sort of like closer shot of her face with the light over it, and she's got like dreamy eyes, and she's just sort of like swooning a little bit. Mm-hmm. And he's so dashing, and he does the Dracula thing and literally like sweeps her off her feet and like carries her away. Mm-hmm. I think that's actually a really compelling scene, and I mean that's because Tony Todd, like,
right,
he's so good in that kind of role where he is like, he's very handsome and he's well dressed and he's got this great voice, and yeah, it's just such a bummer when they have him just like show up in this parking lot and not capitalize on all of the charisma that he's bringing to it.
Right, yeah. Like his voice is fantastic, and his voice shows up. I think his voice is the first thing in the movie. I think so. He has like a voiceover, and he's kind of laying out his ethos, I guess. And when he does finally show up, it's ultimately it is really great. But yeah, it's this whole movie feels like they didn't really understand what they had.
Yeah.
And the potential, like you said, the potential of what they had was it was there. They were rolling the camera, but they weren't really super conscious of exactly the gem that they could have had.
Yeah, which has me. I have high hopes, like you said, for the Jordan Peele version in the fall.
Yeah, and there's a documentary on Shudder right now called Horror Noir that's all about the history of African Americans in horror movies. Oh. That has a substantial section on Candyman where they talk about the creation of the movie a bit and Tony Todd. I wish I had remembered to watch it again before we talked about this, so maybe I wouldn't sound like such an idiot. But
look, we're going to sound like idiots about this. No matter what, both of us.
I'm sure the reason I caveated everything a few minutes ago is because I'm sure there are plenty of people who have a much more have much more reason to point out the failings of this as far as subtext goes that probably read it a lot different than we do.
Yes, so, absolutely.
I don't want to make it feel like we're just doing we're just hashtagging Candyman here. But yeah, it's a weird movie. I would almost be curious to watch. I have never seen any of the sequels. I can't imagine they're very good. But
I don't have high hopes.
I wouldn't mind checking one out just to see if they do anything different or approach it from a different angle. I mean, it's probably worth it just for Tony Todd because he's that good.
Fair.
The music in this, I groaned when I saw Philip Glass's name in the credits. And to be completely fair, my dislike of Philip Glass stems from one very specific thing, which is I have this version of the Nosferatu, the original silent film on DVD, that has a score written by Philip Glass. No, I'm sorry. It's Dracula. It's the 1931 Dracula with an alternate score written by Philip Glass, and I think it sucks. And so, so anytime I see his name attached to a movie, I kind of groan. But the music in this is fantastic.
I had really mixed feelings at first, and then the longer the movie went on, and I sort of realized kind of like what they were going for. Just in terms of where like we were saying, Candyman sometimes does feel like Dracula, where there is that seductive like layer to him. So all of a sudden, this like kind of overwrought opera music started sort of working for me. But at first, I was very much like, ugh, I don't know, I don't like this. And then the further we got into it, I was like, okay, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, well, he wrote this really simple but really evocative theme that much like a lot of great, well, not just horror themes, but themes in general, he can adapt to different situations and different moods depending on which instruments he's using to play it and stuff like that. So sometimes it's just the piano, sometimes it's a little bit bigger and a little bit more orchestral, and I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it for the movie. The one thing that I did really like as an idea that we don't need to hash out because I think we did enough of it at this point, but was they like again talking about how it's like they've got these great ideas that they just kind of like hand wave or just gloss over. Is that one line where they're talking about Candyman as a concept, as an urban legend, and they call him seeing as he's something that is emanating out of this Cabrini Green area where horrible things are happening all the time. They say an entire community starts attributing everyday horrors to a mythical figure, which is a really interesting concept.
Yeah. Especially
given the situation and place that they are specifically talking about. So it's that much more unfortunate when it's like, yeah, that's a great idea. But what if he's also just in love with Virginia Madsen?
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah. And I think that kind of boils down in the end what we both keep nitpicking on, where it's like, yeah, they have this great idea and this great concept, and then they either sort of lose it halfway through, or they don't see it all the way to the end, or all of a sudden it goes from being one thing and then it turns into something else, and it's just kind of like, wait, but you had such a great idea, like that was really compelling. Why aren't we talking about that still?
Right.
Like I loved the use of the graffiti. Where the graffiti in the building was sort of giving you hints about what was happening and about the Candyman's life, because he was an artist.
Right, yes.
So I kind of loved that tie-in, that it's sort of like, because people treat like graffiti and street art like it's just like trash and it doesn't matter and it's just, it's ugly, it's just marking up buildings. But some of it is actually really beautiful, skillful art. It's just
and some of it. Some of it in this movie, though, is literally written in shit. So
yeah, true, absolutely true. And I think the fact that this is both is like, I don't know. I think it's great. I wish they kind of leaned a little bit more into the sort of like visual symbolism that you have there.
Are you familiar with that that line, "Sweets for the sweet"? That's apparently from Hamlet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know the context of it. I just saw that on IMDb when I was looking it up, but I didn't know if maybe you knew the significance of it or not.
No, that one is not in my encyclopedia. I'll have to look up that one.
Taking a point off the English major board for Amanda.
I mean, please do. I feel like I've been hammering it home a little too hard lately.
So what do you think about the placement on the list? This is number 185. It's fairly low. I don't know about this because I feel like what is lacking in the movie itself is made up for by how iconic the character is. So it's a tough call for me.
Yeah, I think I have a similar problem where if we're ranking this movie based just off of the Candyman character, which, by the way, do we ever learn his real name?
His name is Candido D. Mail. With two N's. Nope. I don't know. I don't know if we do.
I don't think we do. You know, yeah. If we're trying to rank this just off of Candyman as a character, and like you were saying, he's this amazing villain, and he's sort of breaking new ground, which is very, very cool. And I love that character, and I love the concept behind it. But I just when you take it all together in the whole movie, I don't know if I would move this on the list.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about its position, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure Jordan Peele's is going to come out in 2 weeks later. It's going to be number 2 on this list.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Judging by this list, that is probably going to happen. Yes.
Yeah.
Quiet Place better hang on to that number 4 spot as long as it can, because it's getting bumped.
It's getting bumped.
Yeah, but I think that's going to do it for Candyman. I hit the randomizer button. Beep, boop, boop, beep, boop, 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 boop. And next time, we will be covering John Carpenter's The Thing.
I am so excited for this one.
I as well. And we will be joined by a friend of mine named Tony McMillan, who's a writer who's working on a comic book called Strange Creatures, I believe it's called, which is it's a fictionalized telling of the special effects business in the 1980s. So he's well-versed in this stuff. And I wanted to have somebody else on just because if we didn't, it was going to be at least me essentially just reading synonyms for amazing off of thesaurus.com, and nobody wants to listen to that. So
yeah, and I don't even think I would really stop you. I think I'd probably be like, yeah, that's true. Yep.
Yeah, it's going to just turn into us going like, remember when this happened? Oh my God.
Yeah.
It was so good.
Oh, that scene's so great. That's so amazing. Yeah.
Kurt Russell's beard and hair look amazing. Yeah. All of those things. So join us next time for John Carpenter's The Thing. If you like the show, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes. That would be amazing. And until next time, thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Clay.
And we will see you then.
Bye, everybody.